How many of you are afraid of CSAT? Show of hands. There's a lot of fear. Okay, so I'll give you my credentials in CSAT. In both my attempts, I have secured 150 plus marks in CSAT. In my first attempt, I secured 151, and this year, 153. So CSAT has been one of my strong areas. I feel confident to guide you in CSAT. When it comes to CSAT, what matters the most is practice. You have to have your fundamentals right. Each one of us has had mathematics until class 10th. And trust me, for qualifying CSAT, that is enough. Even if you have had a humanities background in 11th and 12th or your graduation, it does not matter. What matters is that you have your fundamentals until class 10th very strong, so that you can understand the questions and do not do any silly mistakes or calculation mistakes. So that is something very important. CSAT, as you know, has 3 parts. So I'll just use the pen. So we have quantitative questions. Then we have some reasoning question. Yeah. And there are some comprehension questions. So first, dealing with the quantitative aspects. In quantitative, as I said before, your 10th standard mathematics foundation is enough. There will always be questions that are beyond that syllabus, but CSAT is a qualifying paper, so you do not have to solve all the questions. Just ensure that your accuracy is on point. How many ever questions you're solving, you have to just clear the cutoff. That is 70 marks. 67, but have 70 in your mind. So that, because having a little buffer is necessary. So that is something that you do for quantitative. For those who have not practiced maths in years, the first step would be to go through the PYQs of CSAT. Check what score you are getting. Before, I think people often recommend starting with GS preparation, but I would recommend starting with CSAT preparation, because as the exam draws closer, you do not have time for CSAT. GS is difficult, GS is time taking, and by the end of the exam, when prelims is very close, we don't usually prepare for. So all of you are preparing for the 2023 attempt, or anyone for 24? 23, so, and 2 for 24, I think. So you all have a lot of time. Right now, you can start with CSAT preparation. I'd recommend starting with quantitative and reasoning questions for those who do not have a background in maths or those who have lost practice. Start with the PYQs. Identify your weak areas. So one thing, in every section, I'll be reiterating this. Focus must be on your weak areas. Always. So identify where your weaknesses lie. And once you have identified those areas, do targeted practice regarding those areas. It is possible that you're doing in the first time you're solving the questions and each of the questions is wrong. So you might think all of these are weak areas. So there is this analysis process. Why are you making mistake in a particular question? Whether you don't know the concept, or you have done a calculation mistake, or you were just nervous and you solved the right question, but solved up to the right option, but you marked something else. So that is something that happens with each one of us. You must not lose confidence at that stage. So for quantitative, start practicing even in reasoning. So when it comes to reasoning, I'd recommend, most of us have not done any reasoning until school or even in college. So for reasoning, I'd recommend, there are certain types of questions like sitting arrangement questions or logical questions. There are puzzles. So watch videos of all those questions, how to approach those questions. For example, when a seating arrangement question is done, the first step, if they are writing that they are sitting in a circle, the first step is to draw a circle and mark the number of seats. So these are some fundamental ways of approaching the question that we cannot learn on our own. If we spend time on that, it's a lot of waste, because all of us have limited time. So we cannot learn that on our own. For that, we must watch the videos that are there and use those videos to understand where to start approaching the question. And when you have any problems, most of you, since you are here, you have your peer groups. Those who are not here, they can also look for peer groups online or offline in their area. So what is necessary is to discuss the questions. And there are also several online initiatives where they discuss questions, especially PYQs questions, step by step. So when you're making mistakes, look at the videos of the type of questions that you're making a mistake in, and then look at the steps that they are following, compare it with your process. Sometimes it is possible that you are using a right process. I'm saying a right process because there are multiple ways of solving a question. Some are faster, others slower. So what you must do is to look at what are the faster processes and something to increase the speed. When it comes to maths and reasoning based questions, memorizing the multiplication tables, memorizing squares, cubes, so on helps both in identifying patterns as well as solving. So if you have time, there are methods like the single line multiplication method. They help. Do practice a lot of multiplication, basic multiplication division, so that you don't make mistake in the exam hall. And one tip, use a pencil. When it comes to prelims, always use a pencil in the exam hall. So why pencil? Now I'll compare my first attempt versus my second attempt. In my first attempt, I was using a pen to solve the questions, and as all of us do, I made a few mistakes. I wanted to change the answer. I tried solving again, but then the options were marked, some were marked right, some were marked wrong, and I got confused and marked the wrong answer in my OMR sheet. So to avoid such a mistake, like after solving for the right answer, solving twice and thrice, and yet we are marking the wrong answer. So that is something we all want to avoid. So in this case, using a pencil helps, so that when you're using a pencil, you can just have an eraser, strike out all, erase off all of the first attempt things, and then you can start afresh. So using a pencil is important, and in prelims, both GS and CSAT paper. And next we come to the comprehension section. The one thing that we have to keep in mind is that focus on what is already given in the question. In the comprehension passages, the most common mistake is to use our brain. We should not do that. How many of us are guilty of that? I'll raise my hand. No one else? Never attempted any PYQs? That's where your mistake lies. Start solving with the PYQs. So when it comes to comprehension questions, do not use your brain. Use the information that is given within the question. So for this, when we are starting, we need to start with a pen or a pencil in hand. Even while reading the question, there are two approaches. Some people read the question first and then go to the passage, and some others read the passage first and then go to the question. So I was in the latter category. I always read the question first. After solving a lot of questions, especially comprehension based question, I've arrived at I have an idea of what will be important in this particular question. So while reading the paragraph itself, I underline some of the keywords that are arising in the paragraph. And when we go to the question, 9 out of 10 times, the parts that I have underlined are the ones from which the question is asked. So when I have to solve the question, I can easily just look at my underlines, and it significantly increases my speed. So you can try both methods. UPSC is something where there is no one fixed way of doing things. So you can try both methods and see what fits you and practice accordingly. And practice is always the mantra. So any doubts until this? Any specific doubts in CSAT? Please ask. Yes?
What books should we refer for CSAT?
What?
What books? Any other books that should we refer for CSAT?
Sources for CSAT. So I did not specifically refer to any specific sources during my UPSC preparation. Before UPSC, I referred to R.S. Agrawal's book in reasoning and B.S. Sijwali's book in reasoning. So those I referred during my school time. So if you have time, B.S. Sijwali and R.S. Agrawal, both books are very bulky. So if you are going to refer to those books, should I mention the name here or? So. Sijwali and R.S. Agrawal. So if you are going to refer to any of these books, my basic idea would be to go to the specific chapters that are your weak areas and solve accordingly. And since we are all in a lack of time, go to the harder exercises first, like those questions given at the end of any given exercise. They are the more difficult ones. So start approaching with that. If you are able to solve them, then you can just skip to the next chapter. So some smart ways to optimize your time usage would help. So these are the books that I used during my school time. I am not sure how effective they'll be for UPSC CSAT preparation, but they helped me at that time. So you can try these. And any other questions?
Manu, do you study for CSAT daily or when you study along with GS?
In my case, CSAT has been my strong area. So I only practiced mock tests periodically. So once a month for me. But for those who have difficulty in CSAT, in the beginning, I'd recommend that you give around 3 to 4 hours per week initially. And when you have some strength, like the target must be that whenever you're solving a mock, out of 200, you must be scoring around 100. If you score around 100 in a mock, then even under the pressure conditions of UPSC prelims, you will be able to clear the cutoff. So try targeting 100, and once you start getting 100 marks in each of the mocks that you're attempting, then you can decrease the number of hours you're giving to CSAT. It can be reduced to just 2 hours per week where you solve a mock test. And again, try to solve the mock test within 90 minutes. Because you have 120 minutes in the exam hall. Always assume that 5 to 10 minutes will go in bubbling, or there'll be some disturbance in the classroom. The invigilator would start giving instructions. Things happen. So 5 to 10 minutes for that, and again 15 minutes will go for your OMR sheet, marking the OMR sheet, bubbling and all. So always try to practice for 90 minutes. 90 minutes you'll have to solve the CSAT questions, and then the rest of 30 minutes analyze your mistakes. If it takes longer, it's fine, because analyzing the mistakes is most important. So you can eventually reduce the time, but initially focus more on CSAT. So because initially we do have time for that. Any other questions? Yes?
Ma'am, what is the ideal time limit which we have to complete the comprehension?
It is a very subjective question. So my strength area has been quantitative and reasoning. So I usually start the paper with solving the quantitative and reasoning questions first, marking the OMR sheet for that, and whatever time remains, I attempt the comprehension questions in that. I have some other friends who start with reasoning comprehension questions because it's their stronger area. So it completely depends on you. So the time that you give for comprehension must be dependent on how accurate your comprehension passages are. If you have noticed that if you attempt 10 questions of comprehension and you're getting 9 right, whereas in reasoning and quantitative questions out of 10 you're only getting 5 right, so it makes sense for you to spend more time on comprehension. And vice versa, if you're getting more questions correct in quantitative and reasoning, you can spend more time on that. So it will depend completely on what your accuracy is in the various streams, but ensure that you're scoring around 100 in all of your mocks.